The spotlight found him before he could walk properly. At 5 years old, Michael Jackson stood on stages across America, his tiny frame swallowed by the brightness of 1,000 eyes watching. While other children played with toys and scraped their knees in playgrounds, he rehearsed dance moves until his feet bled. His father's voice echoed through their small Gary, Indiana home like thunder, demanding perfection, accepting nothing less than brilliance. Michael learned early that love came with conditions, that approval had to be earned through sweat and tears. The Jackson 5 became a sensation, and Michael was its shining star. His voice carried a sweetness that seemed impossible for someone so young, a purity that made grown men weep. But behind that angelic sound lived a terror that never left him. Rehearsals meant hours of repetition, and mistakes meant consequences he tried hard to forget. His brothers had each other, but Michael stood apart, special and isolated in equal measure. He watched other kids through hotel windows, playing games he would never understand, living lives he could only imagine. Fame brought money, but it stole something precious. While his songs topped charts and screaming fans chased their car, Michael clutched a stuffed animal in the backseat, wishing someone would ask him what he wanted. Nobody did. The machine of stardom had taken him, and it would never let go. His mother offered what comfort she could, but she too was caught in the system his father had built. Michael learned to smile on command, to perform even when his heart felt like breaking, to give everything to people who would never truly know him. At night, after concerts that left him exhausted, he would lie awake wondering what normal felt like. He heard stories from other kids, about birthday parties, about playing hide and seek, about lazy Saturdays with nothing to do. These stories sounded like fairy tales to him, beautiful and impossible. His childhood was crowds and contracts, stages and studios, always moving, always performing. The boy in the mirror looked older than his years, eyes that had seen too much, a smile that had become a reflex rather than an expression of joy. The world fell in love with little Michael Jackson, but Michael Jackson never got the chance to fall in love with the world as a child should. He was too busy becoming what everyone needed him to be. The cost of that transformation would follow him forever, a ghost that whispered in quiet moments, reminding him of everything he had lost before he even knew he had it. His voice brought happiness to millions, but his own happiness remained always just out of reach, a dream he chased but could never quite catch. The stage became his prison and his sanctuary, the only place where the rules made sense, where his worth was clear and measurable. Away from the lights, he felt lost, a stranger in a world that moved according to rhythms he had never learned. He collected toys and filled rooms with childhood treasures, trying to build what had been taken from him, but you cannot reconstruct innocence once it is gone. The photographs from those early years show a boy smiling, but if you look closely, really closely, you can see something else in his eyes, a loneliness so profound it seems to swallow the light around it. Michael Jackson the performer was born in those years, but somewhere in the process, Michael Jackson the boy began to disappear, replaced by something the world wanted more, something that glittered and sang and danced, but something that was slowly dying inside, suffocating under the weight of expectations too heavy for small shoulders to bear. Adulthood brought Michael freedom, or so it seemed. He signed deals that made him rich beyond imagination, bought a ranch he named Neverland, and transformed himself into the biggest star the world had ever seen. Thriller did not just break records, it shattered them into pieces so small they could never be reassembled. His moonwalk defied gravity, his voice defied description, and his ambition defied limits. Michael Jackson became more than a musician, he became a phenomenon, a force of nature wrapped in a sequined glove. But freedom had come too late to heal the wounds. He wandered the halls of Neverland at 3 a.m, unable to sleep, haunted by memories and expectations. The ranch had everything, rides, animals, a movie theater, games, all the things he had never experienced as a child. He invited sick children to visit, watching their faces light up with joy, and for brief moments, he felt purpose. Their happiness gave him something money could not buy, something fame could not provide. When a child smiled at Neverland, Michael saw redemption, a chance to give others what had been stolen from him. His music grew more ambitious, more personal. Each album was a statement, a piece of his soul offered to a world that consumed it hungrily but never seemed satisfied. Bad, Dangerous, History, each one pushed boundaries, broke new ground, and left Michael more isolated than before. Success at his level created a distance impossible to bridge. People wanted the icon, not the man. They wanted performances and perfection, not vulnerability and truth. Michael tried to show them both, weaving pain into his art, but the message got lost in the spectacle. The tabloids turned on him with vicious glee. Every aspect of his life became fodder for ridicule, his appearance, his voice, his choices, his friends. They called him strange, weird, unnatural. The boy who had been forced to grow up too fast was mocked for trying to reclaim what he had lost. The man who had changed music forever was reduced to a punchline. Michael felt the world shift from adoration to suspicion, and it crushed him in ways that never showed on stage. He still performed with the same intensity, the same precision, but offstage, the darkness grew deeper. Trust became impossible. Everyone wanted something: money, fame, association, a piece of the legend. Michael surrounded himself with employees, but employees are not friends. He made grand gestures of generosity, giving away millions, supporting dozens of charities, funding hospitals and schools. He genuinely believed in making the world better, in using his platform for good. We Are the World, Heal the World, Earth Song. These were not just songs but missions, desperate attempts to create meaning from suffering. If he could not fix himself, perhaps he could fix everything else. But no amount of charity could silence the voices in his head, the ones that sounded like his father, the ones that whispered he was never good enough, never thin enough, never perfect enough. He changed his appearance, seeking an ideal that kept shifting, always just beyond reach. Each surgery was meant to bring peace, to create the person he thought he should be, but the mirror only showed him more questions. The world watched his transformation with fascination and horror, never understanding that they were witnessing a man trying to escape a body that held too many painful memories. Neverland was supposed to be paradise, but paradise built on trauma is still haunted. Michael walked its paths alone most nights, accompanied only by security and staff, surrounded by everything except what he truly needed. His kingdom of dreams had become another kind of prison, beautiful and elaborate, but a prison nonetheless. The rides sat silent, the animals slept, and Michael remained awake, searching for something he could not name, something that might finally make the aching stop. Michael's mission became larger than music. He looked at the world and saw suffering everywhere: children dying from hunger, wars tearing families apart, diseases stealing futures. His heart, despite all its scars, remained capable of extraordinary compassion. While his personal life crumbled under scrutiny, his humanitarian work expanded. He visited hospitals on every tour, spending hours with sick children when he could barely stand from exhaustion. These moments were never publicized by choice. Cameras caught glimpses, but Michael preferred these interactions to remain private, sacred. The pain pill started as a solution, prescribed after the accident during a Pepsi commercial that left him with burns and chronic agony. They offered relief not just from physical pain but from the emotional torture that had become his constant companion. In those chemically induced moments of peace, Michael could breathe without the weight crushing his chest. He could sleep without the nightmares. But relief became dependence, and dependence became another demon to fight. He tried to stop, checked into programs, sought help, but the cycle repeated itself with devastating regularity. His marriages fell apart under pressure no relationship could withstand. Lisa Marie understood him in ways others did not. She too had lived in fame's distorted reality, daughter of another king who had self-destructed. They connected on a level beyond what outsiders could see, but connection alone cannot overcome the damage done by decades of trauma. His second marriage brought him children, the greatest joy of his life and also his greatest fear. He loved them with a fierce, protective intensity, determined they would never experience what he had endured. He shielded them from cameras, covered their faces, guarded their privacy like a dragon guarding treasure. But the accusations came, vicious and calculated, designed to destroy him completely. The court cases drained his resources and his spirit. Whether guilty or innocent became irrelevant in the court of public opinion. The mere suggestion was enough to poison everything he had built. Michael maintained his innocence with every breath, but the stain spread regardless. Friends vanished, collaborators distanced themselves, and the industry that had made billions from his talent suddenly found him too controversial to embrace. The man who had sung about healing the world could not heal his own reputation. He kept creating because creation was all he knew. Music remained his one reliable escape, the place where he still had control, where his vision mattered more than opinions. In the studio, he was still the king of pop, still capable of magic. Outside those walls, he was a broken man trying to hold together pieces that no longer fit. His finances collapsed under the weight of Neverland's maintenance and legal fees. The ranch that represented his dreams became a burden he could no longer afford. Losing it felt like losing himself all over again. Through it all, he continued reaching out to the world with messages of love and unity. His songs pleaded for peace, for understanding, for people to see each other as family. The irony was not lost on him. He preached connection while living in isolation, spoke of healing while deteriorating, offered hope while drowning in despair. But perhaps that is what made his message so powerful. It came from someone who knew darkness intimately, who understood pain not as a concept but as a constant companion. Michael sang about a better world because he so desperately needed to believe one existed, somewhere beyond the nightmare his life had become. His children gave him purpose, but they also amplified his fear. Every moment with them was precious, but every moment also reminded him of how fragile happiness could be, how quickly love could be twisted into something ugly by forces beyond his control. The comeback tour was announced with fanfare that echoed across the globe. This is it, 50 shows in London, a chance for Michael to prove he still had the magic, still commanded the stage like no one else. At 50 years old, with a body worn down by decades of performance and pills, he committed to an impossible schedule. Fans rejoiced, tickets sold out in hours, and the world waited to see if the king could reclaim his throne. But behind the scenes, Michael was falling apart in ways no one wanted to acknowledge. Rehearsals revealed a man struggling to keep up with his own legend. The moves that had once flowed effortlessly now required concentration and effort. His voice, still beautiful, lacked the power of his youth. He smiled for cameras and said the right things, but those close to him saw the exhaustion in his eyes, heard the strain in his breathing. The machine of the comeback tour had been set in motion, and machines do not stop for human frailty. Too much money had been invested, too many expectations created, too many contracts signed. Michael was trapped again, caught in a system that demanded everything while giving nothing back. The pain became unbearable, physical pain from old injuries, emotional pain from a lifetime of trauma, spiritual pain from a soul that had never known rest. Pills became his only reliable comfort, the one thing that made the impossible seem achievable. His personal physician, Conrad Murray, provided what Michael needed to sleep, powerful anesthetics meant for surgery, not bedrooms. It was reckless, dangerous, a disaster waiting to happen. But Michael had spent his entire life doing dangerous things for the sake of performance. This seemed like just another sacrifice required by fame. June 25, 2009, started like any other day of preparation. Michael was tired, anxious about the shows ahead, desperate for sleep that would not come naturally. Dr. Murray administered propofol, the drug Michael called his milk, the only thing that gave him peace. But this time, the peace did not end when it should have. Michael's heart, weakened by years of stress and substance use, simply stopped. In a bedroom in a rented mansion in Los Angeles, while the world went about its business, Michael Jackson died. The king was gone, and the silence that followed his last breath seemed to stretch across the universe. The news broke like a bomb. Social media crashed under the weight of grief and disbelief. News channels showed nothing but Michael's image for days. Millions mourned, many of the same people who had mocked him months before suddenly remembering his genius, his contributions, his humanity. The memorial service drew crowds that rivaled his concerts. Celebrities who had abandoned him in life now praised him in death. The hypocrisy was staggering, but also predictable. Death had transformed him from controversial figure back to beloved icon, erasing the complications and leaving only the legend. His children stood before the world, devastated and vulnerable, robbing the planet of any remaining cynicism. Paris, his daughter, barely able to speak through tears, called him the best father anyone could imagine. Those words carried more truth than any tabloid had ever printed. Whatever his flaws, whatever his struggles, Michael had loved his children with every damaged piece of his heart. He had tried to give them what he never had, to protect them from the cruelty he had endured. In the end, he succeeded in some ways and failed in others, like all parents do, except his failures were broadcast globally while his successes remained hidden in private moments no camera could capture. The investigation into his death revealed the expected: too many drugs, too much pressure, too little care for the human being beneath the icon. Dr. Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, but that verdict changed nothing. Michael was still gone, and all the blame in the world could not bring him back. The tour that was meant to resurrect his career became a documentary of what might have been, rehearsal footage transformed into a memorial. Watching it, you could see a man trying desperately to be who he once was, fighting against time and biology and trauma, determined to prove he still mattered. He did matter, but not for the reasons he thought. His value was never in his ability to dance or sing perfectly. It was in his willingness to keep trying despite everything, to keep creating despite the pain, to keep loving despite the betrayals. After the shock came the reckoning. The world began looking at Michael Jackson differently, trying to reconcile the contradictions, the accused and the innocent, the bizarre and the brilliant, the victim and the icon. His music surged back to the top of charts, reminding people why they had fallen in love with him in the first place. Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Man in the Mirror, these songs had soundtracked millions of lives, and death had not diminished their power. If anything, his absence made them more precious, more meaningful. The estate he left behind was a mess of debt and lawsuits, but also a treasure trove of unreleased material and valuable catalogs. Slowly, carefully, those managing his legacy began the work of restoration, not just of his finances, but of his reputation. More people came forward with stories of his kindness, his generosity, his genuine care for others. The narrative began to shift again, not completely, but enough. People started remembering the man who had visited hospitals in the middle of the night, who had funded entire wings of children's medical centers, who had used his voice to speak for those who had none. His children grew up without him, carrying the weight of his legacy on their shoulders. They spoke carefully about their father, protective of his memory, defensive against ongoing attacks. Prince, Paris, and Blanket, now known as Bye Guy, faced an impossible task, being normal people while also being the children of Michael Jackson. They had his eyes, his features, pieces of his soul. The world watched them obsessively, looking for signs of their father in their faces and actions. They handled it with more grace than anyone had right to expect, though the cost of that grace remained visible in occasional interviews where pain flickered across their expressions. The question that haunted everyone who truly looked at Michael's life was simple and impossible: could anyone have saved him? The answer, uncomfortable and true, was probably not. His damage went too deep, started too early, became too fundamental to who he was. The system that created him, child stardom, abusive perfectionism, relentless pressure, was the same system that destroyed him. He was both its greatest success and its most tragic failure. Other child stars had crashed and burned, but none had reached his heights first, making the fall that much more spectacular, that much more painful to witness. Yet his message survived him. Heal the World was not just a song but a philosophy he had tried desperately to embody. He had used his platform to advocate for children's rights, environmental protection, racial harmony, and peace. These were not publicity stunts but genuine beliefs held by someone who had experienced the worst of humanity and still wanted to believe in its best. That faith, maintained despite everything, was perhaps his greatest achievement, not the records sold or awards won, but the stubborn refusal to let cruelty and pain turn him completely bitter. His musical influence remained undeniable. Every pop star who followed owed him something: a move, a sound, an approach to performance. He had redefined what was possible in music videos, transforming them from promotional tools to art forms. He had broken down racial barriers in an industry that had tried to keep them standing. His artistry was revolutionary, and revolutions do not fade just because the revolutionary dies. They echo through generations, inspiring people who never knew the original spark. In the end, Michael Jackson's story was not one of simple triumph or tragedy but something more complex and human. He was a wounded healer who gave everything to a world that gave him pain in return. He was a man who tried to build childhood dreams with adult resources, discovering too late that some things cannot be reconstructed. He was a father who loved fiercely while battling demons that threatened to consume him. He was an artist who created beauty from agony, transforming his suffering into songs that lifted millions. The world he tried to heal kept turning after he was gone, still broken, still beautiful, still in desperate need of the love he preached. His music played on, his message lived on, and his children carried pieces of him forward into a future he would never see. Michael Jackson had healed the world in small ways and large ones, through songs and actions, through dreams and determination. But his own heart, the one that had broken so early and so completely, had never found the healing it needed. That tragedy would forever color his legacy, a reminder that even those who bring light to others can remain lost in their own darkness. Perhaps that was his final gift to the world, showing us that it is possible to love humanity even when humanity has hurt you, to keep giving even when you have nothing left, to keep singing even when your heart is breaking. He did all of that until the very end, and that, more than anything else, made him not just a king of pop, but a king of the human heart.